Hey, this is Gregory. Uh, this is the second. Oh, that's confusing because this is part one. This is the second video I'm producing. This is part one of espresso extraction styles. So it's abundantly confusing. I probably should have thought through this better. But yeah, people are kind of excited to get into this content. So I thought, let's just get it to market and see what happens. So, pardon my lack of thoughtfulness here. Also, I've discovered in the last 48 hours how much work goes into a YouTube channel, which is a whole revelation for an old guy who likes to pull shots of espresso and goof off. So, yep, if you have any questions about this, I'm sure there will be more. Feel free to email me. A few people have come out of the woodwork who are opening cafes or roasteries, or a couple folks who are starting a new job as a barista and are excited to learn. So reach out if you have any questions. So by way of rundown, we're going to get into I think 6 or 7 topics over the next 2 videos. This video and the next video. We're going to talk through historical styles of espresso extraction. We'll talk about models. When I say models, I'm really describing sets of parameters that that manufacturers kind of force you into that allow it to be production of espresso to be easier. We'll call them models because it's easier than saying espresso machine manufacturers reducing parameters or variables to make production of espresso easier for baristas session. Yeah, it's not great. Yeah, what's wrong with it? And then we're going to be talking about parameter sets. So we'll introduce parameter sets here. And then in the next video, we will dive into the tools that you would use to wiggle around and identify a parameter set that makes sense for you in your home setup or for your cafe setup, whatever that might be. I think it's worth saying out loud that I was a barista for years, and there's nothing quite as annoying as someone who doesn't know what they're talking about telling you that your coffee sucks. It's very frustrating, especially when you care. So I would just, word of the wise, as you learn, I would encourage you to ask questions, to approach baristas with a spirit of curiosity and not of critique. Because, yeah, there are lots of bad baristas out there, but the frank reality is that they're grinding out a hard job and doing their best, and they don't need you to come in and tell them how to be good. Yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Anyway, let's dive into strength versus extraction. Okay, so let's look at espresso strength. Strength, typically, at least the way I think about it, is a relationship of ingredients, right? We're talking about yield to dose. Like it says in the slide, it isn't a perfect description because it doesn't take extraction quality into consideration. You can have 2 parts yield to 1 part dose, or a beverage in the cup that weighs twice the amount as the dry dose, which means that some amount of the coffee made it into the beverage, some amount of the water used in the extraction made it to the beverage, but there's still like a lot of water and certainly a lot of insoluble coffee in that puck or in that portafilter basket after you have made your recipe. So if Gregory makes an espresso that weighed 40 grams, 40 gram shot, it's a pretty big shot. It's like a ounce and a half. From 20 grams of coffee, I would have used a 2-to-1 recipe. Yield to dose, right? That when we think about that as strength, it's not about flavor quality. It's not about flavor quality. It is solely a measure of the ingredients used in this recipe. And again, we're weighing it in grams. Why is it important to understand strength in those terms? Well, Turns out that a lot of the historical styles that we know from, going to different coffee shops or ever having drunk an espresso in your life, extraction styles are informed by recipe ratios, right? So when someone's roasting a coffee for an Italian style, they're typically intending on that coffee being extracted somewhere around a 1-to-1 ratio, right? You're going to get those darker roasts, those fluffy cremas, syrupy shots, malty, chocolatey flavors, not a lot of acidity, certainly not a lot of fruit-like acidity. So as you start to progress through time, you see these shot styles evolving, right? Part of it's a relationship to the mechanics, the machines. Part of it's a relationship to the palate of the populace, right? People have changed their palate preferences generationally. That's kind of a cool concept. Not going to go into super deep detail right now, but you tend to see these trend lines, right? You have this 2000 Seattle style, right? The Starbucks style. That is historically like a 1.5-to-1 ratio of yield to dose. The American or European style, this is your San Francisco, I think back to like Dark Matter in Chicago. I think about some of the, medium roasted American or German. You see this a lot in Paris as well, styles 2-to-1. And then you have, as you get that higher ratio, 2.5-to-1, you start getting to the Australian stuff, the New Zealand stuff, where you get these coffee shots, right? Where it's almost texturally, body-wise, similar to filtered coffee. So you're trying to understand the style of espresso extraction that you're, at your shop. A few people reached out, you're opening a coffee shop, you're starting a roaster. If you're thinking about your style of espresso extraction, I would encourage you to get away from this idea of describing it ephemerally or describing it in big language. Like, I want something juicy, or I want something, snappy, or I want something dark. I would encourage you to think about the mechanics and the parameters that you can actually control, and then describe the coffee that comes out of a replicable recipe. Right? If you're working with a volumetric machine, a gravimetric machine, a manual machine, a chronometric machine, you're going to have some natural limitations in your espresso style that you're going to have to train to. Or if you're pulling shots at home, your machine just might have limitations. So I would encourage you to do the research and figure out what you can replicate, what you can create consistently, and then build recipe descriptions or flavor descriptions based on what's actually doable. So you think about basket size, go to the manufacturer, find out the basket size in grams. Dosing range, I would encourage you to keep it plus or minus 1 gram of basket size. For your ratio range, identify a range, right? We serve a 1.2 to 1.5-to-1 ratio. We serve a 1.9 to 2.1-to-1 ratio. When you think about all of these different elements, start to identify the framework, the boundaries for yourself, so that you kind of have something to work within. It's so easy to just pop some amount of coffee into your portafilter, tamp it, and go, and have a good shot that you can't replicate. And that's no fun for anyone when you have this awesome shot that you don't know how to replicate because you haven't done the work of identifying what your machine, what your coffee is capable of. I can publish later on my theory about God shots. I think probably my hashtag for this series will probably be I don't believe in God shots. Namely because I do think that the idea of a God shot or a perfect shot typically happens when people aren't paying attention to other factors. The once in a lifetime shot tends to happen when people don't know their coffee, don't know their machine, and don't know how to actually maneuver these details. So like I said at the top, if you're a barista and you're thinking to yourself, gee, I've never had a conversation with my trainer or my manager or any of my peers about any of these things, uh, you're not alone. And if you're a home enthusiast or just someone who likes espresso and you're thinking, man, I wonder if the barista at the coffee shop down the street knows this stuff, there's a solid chance that they don't, and that's not their fault. And it's not our job, you and me. It's not our job to go around telling people how to do their job. And so I would say this: I feel pretty passionately that that baristas do hard work, and the job is hard, and it is hard enough to do this well at home in the peace of your own home with your dog snoozing in the corner. It is super difficult to do this in front of a line of customers or guests or people you want to impress. And so don't be an asshole, I guess is the way to say that. If you have any questions, the next video is going to take a deep dive on how to actually manipulate these parameters to get delicious flavors. But I'll repeat what I said at the top. If you want to dive in theory-wise, I am an email away, groundedcoffeebook@gmail.com. I think that and that's all I gotta say. It's a crazy world out there. Be safe. Have fun.